Hi, my name is Sabina Johnson, and this is my restaurant generating application built in Python using SQLite. In general, the application will randomly select a restaurant in the Des Moines area and display that to the user at random. And it also will allow the user to edit, view, and add restaurants. The problem I was trying to solve is how much time it takes to choose a restaurant sometimes. You may have different people in your household that like different things. So I really wanted to give people their time back by having this application randomly generate a place to go and eat. So let's get started. So first, when you run the application, the first thing that's going to happen is the tables are going to be created and the data is going to get seeded. For this application, I chose to use the MVC pattern, design pattern. I learned about it in our C# advanced class, and I found that it was really helpful in staying organized in this project. As you can see, I've got a few different controllers. I have an E controller, add and search, an edit controller. I find that multiple controllers are really helpful to be able to follow the logic of where things are being passed around to. Again, it was great for an organizational standpoint, and it was really great when I had to do some debugging. So one of the first features is the eat feature. And within this frame, there's a couple different options. So the user can be surprised or add some categories to their restaurant. So I'm gonna do the surprise me. So when I do that, a restaurant does get displayed to the user. This is both the restaurant name and address. If I choose to try again, it's going to redisplay another restaurant for me. So now I want to show you the backend database a little bit. So here is my database structure. So these are my tables. So you'll notice I actually have 4 different tables. I really spent a good amount of time deciding how I wanted to really organize this project. And part of that was, how am I going to structure these tables? How many tables are we going to have? What are their primary keys? How are they going to what are their IDs? I have some auto incrementing for some of the IDs in the tables. So you'll notice I do have a restaurants table that does hold the restaurant name and rating. And then I also have my address table, which holds the addresses. There is a categories table with different types of categories. There's a category ID associated with that. And then I have this restaurant and categories table. So this table's purpose is really to handle the many-to-many relationships the categories table has with the restaurant. A restaurant such as maybe Bravo can be categorized as Italian, and that it offers both lunch and dinner. So those are 3 different categories. And then also, on the other hand, a category such as Italian can have many restaurants associated with it. So that was kind of the purpose of that particular table, is to manage that. So 4 different tables. Because I had 4 different tables, I had to be very particular in writing my SQL statements to query the data, to display different things to the user. So for example, here, you'll notice I'm displaying the restaurant name, which is found in my restaurants table, but then I'm displaying the address from the address table. So I'm joining those tables and then displaying those things to the user. Now let's get into the I'm picky. So there's a few categories that I have. I mentioned a few of them earlier, but breakfast, lunch, and dinner, American, Mexican, Italian, Bosnian, and then also fast food and sit down. I didn't want to have too many categories. I thought it would really take away from what the application was supposed to be. And it's supposed to be at random. It's supposed to be surprising and spontaneous. So adding too many filters, I think, would maybe take a little bit away from that. So these are the ones I chose in case, somebody was particularly looking for breakfast. So I do have some user validation here. So for example, there's no restaurant in the Des Moines area, no Bosnian restaurant in the Des Moines area that serves breakfast. So when I try to generate or display a restaurant from the database that matches these categories, you'll notice I get a window that pops up that says no results found. However, if I kind of change things around, if I decide to do dinner, then there will be a Bosnian restaurant that is available. So let's say I want to do Italian and sit down, and then there's an Italian restaurant that displays to the user. So again, with this, it is retrieving the name of the restaurant and the address. Now, one challenge I had in this particular table was every time the user selected one of these categories, that was a request. Each category was a request. And then I had to do like an intersection. So I have that code here. Then I had to do an intersection of each of the sets to then obtain the list of restaurants that matched all those categories and then return that back and end up displaying that to the user. So I thought that was pretty challenging. It was kind of fun to work through, but okay, so let's go back. So that's the eat frame options, those two. Now, if I go back to my landing page, there's a few more features here. So one is the add feature. So the add feature does have some user validation as well. So the name, street, city, state, and zip code is required. I don't require the categories or ratings just because I felt like the user may not want to input those when they're creating or when they're adding a new table or a new restaurant. So let's add McDonald's. And you'll notice now when I hit submit, it's going to again display a little error message, new window, because I have not added all the categories yet. Okay, and again, if I were to hit submit, it's going to tell me I need a city. So let's add Waukee. And then state Iowa. So now this would allow me to submit, which would add the restaurant into the database. However, I want to just show you a few more validation. So the rating isn't required, but it does have to be between 1 and 5. So if I display a 10, you'll notice that then there is an arrow message that occurs. So let's change that to 1. And then I do want to show you guys what it looks like on the back end when the categories are selected. So we'll choose breakfast, lunch, and dinner, American, and fast food. So there's 4 different categories that I'm choosing for McDonald's. When I hit submit, then it's going to display a little message to the user that it's been added. And so now if I return back to my database, into my restaurants, you'll notice that McDonald's has been added and there's my rating of 1. So again, if I were to, add Wendy's, and Wendy's was on Maple Street and it's still in Waukee, and we're going to keep those the same. Maybe I'll give Wendy's a better rating here. Again, there's the message that displays. And then going back to the database, I'm going to refresh this, and then you can see how Wendy's was added into the restaurants table. Oh, I guess in addition, I could show you here. So if I go to addresses, you'll notice both McDonald's and Wendy's have been added. And then in the restaurant categories table, this looks a little bit different. So it's getting the restaurant ID from the restaurants table and the category ID from the categories table. And then it's associating those together based off what the user selected. The next feature I have is the search feature, which allows a couple different things. It allows the user to query the whole database. It will display the data to the user, and then it will also allow the user to edit the data. So in the search, I really wanted to create a good user experience here. So I did not want the user to have to know the exact name of the restaurant. So what I mean with that, I wrote a SQL statement that really would allow them to be as minimal or as specific as they wanted to. So for example, if I knew of a restaurant that had taco in the name, but I didn't know the full name of the restaurant, I could just type in taco, and every restaurant name, because it's creating the restaurant table, so it's looking at the name, every name that has taco in it is going to display, and it's not case sensitive or anything like that. So going back to our McDonald's example. So here's the McDonald's that I entered. So if I go to edit this McDonald's, let me pull up the database here and show you in restaurants. So right now I had marked McDonald's at a rating of 1. So if I go and I update that, let's say I wanted to change it to a 5, I'm going to submit. So again, I'm going to get a display message there. And now you'll notice that when I refresh this, it is now a 5. And, you know, if I decide, oh, I meant to say West Des Moines instead, I could get that updated. And then in the database, when I refresh this, actually got to go to address because it's my address table. Then you'll notice that now says West Des Moines instead of Waukee. That returns me back to my landing page. And then of course I can cancel to get out of the application altogether. So again, some of the challenges, the one I mentioned earlier was really in this I'm picky feature. It's just making sure that when they were choosing each one of these categories that I was able to kind of intersect that and come up with the appropriate result. That was pretty challenging. The way I had set up my table, so my table structure, my design, because I was working with 4 different tables, it just took more complex SQL statements to be able to get the information that the user needed to see based off their selections. The other challenge I had is using tkinter. Tkinter was very unknown to me prior to, of course, this class, but you know, we did a couple assignments with GUIs, but I became very familiar with it and played around with it, did lots of things, did some stuff on the design, not a designer by any means, but kind of had some fun with the colors and changing fonts and changed the icon up here. I chose to do multiple frames on the window, just from a design perspective. I felt like it was easier to display things to the user. So for example, this is a frame, but then these buttons are in their own frame. I felt like it worked a lot better with the grid system. So yeah, just becoming familiar with tkinter was a challenge, but I was able to accomplish that. So I feel really, really proud of that. The other thing I would love to change is just getting a bigger database. So I don't have a lot of restaurants in there. I just manually added those. Would be great to maybe find a website that I could download some local restaurants or and then the last thing was time. You know, I put this together in a couple of weeks. It would be nice to have more time to add some more features and maybe have the display be a little bit prettier. But overall, I'm really proud of this application. It solved the problem that I was initially trying to solve. And that's it. Thank you.